Right. Welcome to our first lesson on gradients. We're going to be looking at gradients of line today. And this is a topic that you must understand if you want to find the equations of straight lines and also if you want to do differentiation. So it's a very, very important topic today. So the gradient of a line is just a measure of how steep the line is. In front of me here, I've got four lines. I've got line A, which is nearly flat line. It's nearly horizontal line. So the gradient of line A is nearly zero, nearly zero, because you can see it's horizontal. It's a flat line. So it doesn't have any steepness. The gradient of B is steep, is higher, but not as high as gradient of C. So A is nearly flat. So if I just assume that A is flat, the gradient there is basically going to be zero, right? Now B could have a gradient of something, say for example, 3. Now if B has a gradient of 3, then C will have a gradient of something like, say for example, 9, something more than a 3, okay? So the steeper the line, the bigger the number that is used to represent the gradient. So C has got a higher gradient because it's steeper than this B here, right? Line A is almost flat. So I will say that line A has got no gradient or basically zero gradient. Now, line D will have a negative gradient because we normally think about gradient as rising from the left all the way to the right. Okay, so from the left going all the way to the right, you can see that this is almost horizontal. Likewise, from the left all the way to the right, you can see that the line is rising up. So the grade is going to be positive. Again, for C, from the left all the way to the right, you can see that this line is basically rising up, but it's again almost vertical. Okay, so that means that the gradient is very, very high for this. Okay, so if I just do this, if we just do another one. All right, so if this is going to be, let's say for example, this is E. So if this one has got a gradient of 3, then this could have, say for example, 7 that I spoke about. So that means that C could have a higher gradient, more than 7. So I'm just using 9 to make it simple to understand. But this one will have a very, very big gradient if you have to actually do it practically. Right. So for this one now, you can see that if I'm starting from the left all the way to the right, the line is falling. So it's going to have a negative gradient. Okay. Now, and this is what I've just basically explained. Now, what I want us to think about is how we can actually get gradients practically in maths. Now, to find a gradient of a line, you will actually need to know how many steps you are making on the y-axis compared to how many you're making on the x-axis. So if I'm moving from this point here all the way to that point there, how many steps am I making along the x-axis compared to how many steps I'm making along the y-axis? That's going to give us the value of gradient. So for this line here, I'm going to first of all see how many steps I'm going up in y-axis. Is the vertical distance first that you look at. So that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. Okay, so I'm going to go 4 squares. And then you're going to look at how many steps you're making across. So from this point here to that point here, I am making 3 steps across. Okay, so 3 horizontal steps. Now, the gradient is always a number whereby the steps you make on the vertical go up and the steps you make on the horizontal go down. So the gradient of this line is going to be 4/3. It means that from here all the way to here, you are making 4 steps up and 3 steps across. So that's how to work out the gradient. Now the gradient can be written as a fraction, or even as a percentage, or even as a decimal. Right? For example, if I'm making 1 step up on the y-axis, while only making 4 steps along the x-axis, then the grade is going to be 1/4, and this is the same as 25%. Okay, so you can always do it as gradient, as percentage, but for your exam, we're going to keep on to fractions. This is the one that we like a lot. Okay, right. So the gradient is the change in the y-axis divided by change in the x-axis. So now let's look at a proper example. They want us to find the gradient of this line. Okay, right. So the first thing you need to do, you can always start from the bottom part of the line all the way up. Okay, so when I come from point B all the way to point A, I'm gonna need to move 3 steps back. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually 4 steps back. Okay. So I'm gonna need to move 4 steps to the left. So this is gonna be 4 steps. So because I'm moving backwards, I'm gonna put -4. Okay. Then I'm gonna need to go 3 steps up. All right. So 1, 2, 3. So that's gonna be +3. So now the gradient is going to be the number of steps I'm making upwards compared to the number of steps I'm making across. So gradient. Okay. So that's going to be the number of steps I make upwards. So y comes first, then x comes down. Now remember 3 divided by -4 is basically going to be negative. So I've got +3 here, and it's like I'm dividing by -4. So that's just going to be -3/4. That's going to be the gradient here. Okay, so that's how to get the gradient of a line. So you count how many steps you're making across, and if you're moving backwards, that's going to be negative, and if you're moving up, that's going to be positive, right? Remember, you start from the bottom part, rising all the way up. So the gradient of this line is going to be negative. Remember, this is a falling line. Falling lines normally have negative gradients, okay? Right, so the vertical distance between A and B is 3 squares. That's this one. And the horizontal distance is actually 4 squares, but you see I'm moving backwards. That's why you see the gradient is -3/4, as I said earlier. Okay. Right, so I'd like you to pause this video and try question 1 quickly. So pause the video and try question 1. Okay, hope you've tried this. So in answering question A, B, C, D, all I need to do is to work out the gradient. That's all these questions asking me to do. So to find the gradient, I'm gonna see from point A all the way to point Y. I will need to see how many steps I make on the x-axis compared to how many steps I make on the y-axis. So on the y-axis, I'm making 3 steps positive, and on the x-axis, I'm making 3 steps positive, and on the y-axis, I make 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 steps positive. So the gradient here is going to be the number of steps you're making, the number of steps. So the number of steps you make on the y-axis, which is 4, divided by the number of steps you make on the x-axis. The gradient is 4/3, and it's positive because the line is rising. Okay. And what I want you to do now, I would like you to pause the video and try question 2, please. Pause the video and try question 2. Okay, hope you've tried them. So what I'm going to do really quickly, I want to just find the gradient of 2 of them for you. So if I start with this, A, for example, the number of steps from A to B would be 1, 2, 3 along the x, right? And then 1, 2, 3 along the y, okay? So for the first one, it's going to be, the gradient is going to be 3 along the y divided by 3 along the x is going to be 1, okay? So this gradient is basically going to be 1. It means that for every 3 steps you move across, you're moving 3 steps up, okay? Now, if I look at, say, for example, this other one here, I start from F and I go backwards as I rise up. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 along the X, but you see this is minus as I go back, and then that's going to be 2 up. So the gradient will be 2 out of -6. Now 2 out of -6 will be the same as 1 over -3 because you just half it. You simplify them by dividing by 2. And that's the same as -1/3. Remember, if the line is falling, the grade is going to be negative, okay? But as for I and J is a flat line. You can see that I am making 1, 2, 3, 4 steps across, but I'm not making any up. So the grade is going to be 0 steps on the Y divided by 4 steps on the X, which is going to be 0, because 0 divided by 4 is basically 0, okay? So I'd like you to pause the video really quickly, and then you just mark your work. So pause the video and mark your work. Okay. So we're talking about gradients today. Remember, if the line is rising, has got a positive gradient, and if the line is falling, has got a negative gradient. To work out the gradient, see how many steps you're making along the y-axis and how many steps you're making along the x-axis, and then you just divide them. Okay, so that's going to be the end of our introduction to gradients.